Today, if you cut your finger with a knife, you probably will not think much about it. You rinse it under the tap, you put on a bandage, and you continue with your day. If the wound is deeper, you go to a hospital, a doctor cleans it, and if necessary, you receive antibiotics. A few days later, that injury becomes nothing more than a small memory, something you barely remember. But if you travel back just 200 years, that same small wound could become a countdown to death. Your skin turns red. The wound begins to swell. Pus starts forming beneath the surface. The pain grows stronger with every passing hour. Then comes the fever. Your mind becomes weak. Your mind becomes confused. The infection spreads into your bloodstream. Your immune system begins fighting a battle it cannot win. And eventually, a tiny wound only a few centimeters long can take the life of a completely healthy person. The most terrifying part of this history is that people living in that world had no idea what was actually killing them. They could see the wound, they could see the pus, they could see the suffering. But they could never see the true enemy. Before the microscope revealed the hidden world of microbes, humanity was fighting a war inside its own body without knowing who the enemy was. Invisible organisms were multiplying inside them, slowly turning a simple injury into a deadly threat. They were called bacteria. So the question is, before antibiotics, when bacteria entered the human body, how did anyone survive? What did people try? And what price did humanity pay to stay alive? For most of human history, getting injured was not a small problem. It was a survival crisis. Today, we feel safe because a powerful wall of modern medicine stands between a wound and death. Cleaning, disinfection, surgery, antibiotics. That wall did not exist. A farmer cutting his hand while working in a field. A soldier wounded by a sword. A child falling and scraping their knee. These were ordinary accidents. But in the past, any one of them could open the door to death. Because your skin is not just a layer covering your body. It is your first line of defense. The moment that barrier is broken, microscopic organisms gain a path into the human body. And once they enter, the battle begins. In ancient wars, we often imagine the greatest danger was the battlefield itself. The sword, the arrow, the spear, the bullet. But many soldiers who survived the battlefield did not survive what came afterward. The real enemy arrived days or even weeks later. Inside the wound, a soldier could escape the enemy's weapon, only to be defeated by the enemy, living inside his own body. The wound became infected. The fever arrived. The body weakened. The soldier died for ancient armies. Surviving the battle did not mean the danger was over. Sometimes, the real war had only just begun. To stop wounds from getting worse, humans tried almost everything. Some methods sound terrifying today. One of the most brutal was fire. In medieval and early modern battlefields, surgeons sometimes used a technique called cauterization. They believed that if a wound began to decay, extreme heat could stop the corruption from spreading. So they heated iron tools until they glowed red. Then pressed them directly against injured tissue. No anesthesia. No modern pain control. The patient simply endured the unbearable pain. Surgeons even experimented with boiling substances to treat severe injuries. They did not know bacteria existed. They did not understand infection. They only knew one thing. Something inside the wound was destroying the patient, and they were trying to fight an invisible enemy with the only tools they had. But humanity did not only turn to fire. They also searched nature for answers. Ancient healers used plants, honey, resins, herbs, and surprisingly, some of these methods were later shown to have real medical value. Honey, for example, can create a protective barrier, and certain natural properties can slow the growth of some bacteria. Even more surprising, some ancient medical traditions describe using mold, containing materials on wounds. Of course, they had no understanding of the science behind it. They did not know that certain molds could produce substances capable of fighting bacteria. They simply noticed something strange. Some unusual treatments seemed to help wounds heal. Thousands of years later, science would finally reveal why. There was another ancient treatment that sounds almost impossible to believe. Maggot therapy. To modern people, the idea sounds horrifying. But doctors discovered that certain types of maggots behaved in a very specific way. They consumed dead, damaged tissue, while leaving healthy tissue untouched. They acted like tiny biological cleaners, removing the parts where infection could grow. Today, modern medicine has actually brought this technique back, using specially controlled maggots to treat severe wounds that refuse to heal. It is one of the strangest lessons in medical history. Sometimes ancient observations contained truths that science would only understand centuries later. But none of these methods solved the biggest mystery. Humanity still did not know what infection actually was. People did not know why wounds became infected, why pus appeared, why a healthy person could suddenly die. The enemy remained invisible until the 19th century, when science finally opened the hidden world beneath our eyes. The microscope revealed something extraordinary. Tiny living organisms existed everywhere. Bacteria. Microbes, they were not curses. They were not punishment from the gods. They were biological enemies. Real enemies. The moment that changed human history forever happened in 1928. A British scientist named Alexander Fleming was studying a common type of bacteria called Staphylococcus. One day, Fleming returned to his laboratory and noticed something unusual. One of his culture dishes had been contaminated by a strange mold. Normally, that dish would have been thrown away. Around the mold, the bacteria had disappeared. A clear circle surrounded the strange growth. The bacteria that had been multiplying everywhere were gone. The mold was producing a substance that could stop bacteria from growing. That discovery would eventually become penicillin. And the antibiotic era had begun. Penicillin did not just change medicine, it changed warfare. It changed society. It changed the lives of ordinary people. During World War I, countless soldiers survived the battlefield, only to die later from infected wounds. But by World War II, mass-produced antibiotics helped save countless injured. A wound that once meant death could now mean treatment. An infection that once meant hopelessness could now mean recovery. For the first time, humanity had a weapon that could fight back against the microscopic world. The true greatness of antibiotics is not that they make humans impossible to break. They did something much deeper. They changed our relationship with death. For thousands of years, human destiny could be decided by something unbelievably small. A scratch, a fall, a splinter. Today, we have another chance. We can treat it. We can heal. We can survive. We often think civilization is measured by skyscrapers, cars, the internet, artificial intelligence. But sometimes, civilization hides in the smallest places. It can be an antibiotic pill, a sterile hospital room, a disinfected surgical instrument. Before antibiotics, humanity fought infection with everything it had. Fire, red iron, boiling oil, honey, mold, microscopes, penicillin, thousands of years of fear, experimentation, and discovery were eventually compressed into one tiny pill sitting inside a medicine cabinet. Today, antibiotics may seem ordinary. A small box of medicine, a doctor, as prescription, a short course of treatment. But for most of human history, this was an unimaginable miracle. Antibiotics transformed infection from an unpredictable shadow of death into a problem humanity could finally fight. The greatest achievement of modern civilization is not that it makes us immortal. It is that, when we are injured, we no longer have to sit in the darkness and wait for fate to decide what happens next. So the next time you clean a small cut, or take a simple antibiotic pill, remember this: you are not using an ordinary convenience. Inside that tiny pill is thousands of years of human suffering, failure, discovery, and the endless search for an answer. Modern antibiotics did not just change our bodies. They changed something far greater. They gave humanity, for the first time, the ability to buy back time from death. Allah, see you in the next chapter.